Thank you. Thank you very much. Let's see here. Do we have recording started? Yep, I think we're good to go. All right, we got a lot of stuff to cover today. I'm going to start off with a book report. There's a bunch of books that you can read as part of this. It's ones that I have found very helpful in my career, but there's really only three that are required. For this first section, which is the basics of management, I put in something called the 1-Minute Manager. In the second section, we're going to move to the Emotional Intelligence Quick Book. And the third section, we'll be going into leadership and self-deception. They actually build on each other at each point. The reason for the 1-Minute Manager, it's been around forever. It's got some 25 some odd million copies sold. To say that it is as close to a biblical management book as you can get is not a joke. And it has, however, changed, though. It's been around a long time, so it's gotten odd over the years. So we're going to very quickly go through the precepts of that book, and then we're going to get into our usual shtick on this whiteboard. So 1-Minute Manager really breaks down everything into three sections. There's 1-minute goal setting. There's 1-minute praising and 1-minute reprimand. The book is ridiculously simple. It is ridiculously small, but some truths often are very simply stated. For 1-minute goal setting, they go through 6 things. First off is agree on your goals, and this is you, your team, and you and above. See what good behavior looks like. That's an interesting little twist. What does success look like is something that is almost always overlooked. So you've got to determine with your team what it is that you find acceptable and what it is that they see as acceptable, and make sure those two things link up. That alone is cause for more problems when you're doing reviews with your teams than almost anything you can think of. Write out each of your goals on a single page using less than 250 words is what they say. Is that required? Not really. It's just a hint and a half that you need to keep your goals simple. If you have to take a lot of time to explain what you're trying to do or the value you're trying to add, you've already failed, right? So it needs to be very simple, very concise, easily understood. They talk about reading and rereading each goal. They talk about taking a minute out of your day to look at your performance. All this is true. And then finally, they say, see whether or not your behavior matches your goal. Okay with this. I do it weekly. And in fact, most of the things that they talk about you doing every day, you should do weekly. Let me explain the difference why. When this book was written, the way you dealt with the people that worked with you, for you, or above you, was all in one office. Everything was local. When you dealt with anyone, you dealt in person. Well, things have changed quite a bit. We've got touch points. Management today is, for lack of a better word, omni-channel. I text people from my phone. I Skype people all day. I send them emails from within an Outlook environment, and I'm on the phone less and less. And more of my people are long distance. When this book was written, that wasn't the case. You gave feedback in person and immediately. Today, if you do it weekly, that's actually not too bad. You've got so many touch points with your team, you don't have to make this individual thing automatic and truly terrifying, and let's get it right now or it's too late. Weekly is fine for almost all of these. 1-minute praising, short and sweet. This isn't a conversation. You're literally just pointing out good behavior, what we talked about earlier, what good behavior looks like. I will tell you that there's something in here that throws most people for a loop, and it's stop for a moment of silence to let them feel how good you feel. That's awful touchy-feely language. But stopping after you praise is actually important. The same thing is going to be said for after a reprimand. And it really comes down to, don't continue to sell after you've closed the deal. You've told someone they did good, stop. Let them react, let them talk to you. Same thing with the reprimand. There's no difference between the way they've set up telling someone they did good and the way they've set up someone that maybe exhibited behavior you don't particularly like. One thing I do want to point out here, because it's an HR issue about that big, is they say, shake hands or touch people in a way that makes it clear that you support their success in the organization. Or shake hands or touch people in a way that makes them feel good or how good you feel. If any of you are touching anybody else that makes them feel how good you feel, you're fired. This was written in a far different day. The management books in those days used to literally say, when you give someone praise, reach out and pat them on the shoulder. Reach out and put your hand on the back of their shoulder and walk with them and tell them how important it is. Yeah, that was a whole other generation. It's frankly not appropriate in my mind, even then. Today, not even a chance. Tell them how happy this makes you. Don't show them. That's just not appropriate. One other thing I wanted to point out, though, because the reprimand's the same thing, tell them you're going to do it, reprimand immediately, tell what they did wrong, focus on the issue or the behavior, not the person. The one thing that is missed most often, and I do expect you guys to read these books, they are worth reading. The one thing that's always missed is the last one on 1 minute reprimand. Realize that when the reprimand is over, it's over. The number of people that I've seen in my career, and here when I first started, who got mad at somebody or were reprimanding or got somewhat emotional about it, who weren't able to let it go, is mind-boggling. It's the death of a team. It's the death of teamwork. If I see a behavior that I don't appreciate, I'm going to call and I'm going to call it out and I'm going to say it very clearly, unequivocally, no questions. But then I'm done. If more needs to be done, if it was inappropriate where a different action was required, I'm not even going to bother with the reprimand. I'm going to take the other action. What you can't do is float in between. I've told you this, but I'm taking it personally and I'm still angry. If you can't let it go, you are not ready to reprimand. If you can't speak to an employee, a team member, a helper of some sort, the words don't matter, in a very plain and calm manner without getting emotional, you're not ready to have the conversation. Pass it off to somebody else, ask somebody else for help, bring somebody else into the conversation. You shouldn't be having it. If you can't let it go, you can't do it. So keep that in mind. That's probably the strongest thing, that and the reset, the weekly reset, that I got out of this book all those years ago. If you look on my calendar to this day, one day out of the week, there's a 30-minute slot that says reset. This is where I literally sit and ask myself, am I doing the right thing? Am I staying true to my values, not just the company's, but my own? Am I looking at this correctly? When we get into leadership and self-deception, you'll also learn about getting out of the box and looking at it clearly without preconceptions, without your glasses of one shade or the other getting in the way. I have a weekly meeting with myself where I do this. And I found over the years, because I've been doing this a long time, that I'm often off. Every other week at least, I realize I blew it. I need to stop. I need to sit back. I need to think again. And if you can't do that, if you can't be honest with yourself and you can't be humble and you can't recognize that sometimes you don't meet the mark, you're going to have a hard time leading a team because you're asking for that same sincerity and honesty out of them. You owe it to them as the boss. Now, let's move aside from our book report and go to the good stuff. Today we're going to talk about the good boss, and we're going to talk about self-driven management. The good boss is a noun. It's a mythical creature, just underneath a unicorn, but above Sir Lancelot. It's something that everybody remembers with rose-colored glasses. It's that one person you worked for who always cared, always was concerned, never made a mistake. And people talk about their favorite boss like they do their favorite teacher. If you're young in your career, you may not have met your favorite boss yet, but it'll happen. Sometime before you retire, you'll start the conversation around, well, I'll never forget when I worked for Sheila. How awesome was she? How do you be a good boss? It's a good question. The truth of the matter is you're never going to be that mythical. You can't live up to that. But you can be extraordinary by not being average. Let me explain what I'm talking about. Engagement, which is to say people who are fully invested in a business, in a group, in a unit, in a team, in the United States, is at what everybody considers to be a historical low. We are at, I think the last number I saw, is approximately 70% engagement level, which literally means 70% of people are unengaged, not engaged. It's a reverse metric. 70% of the people say they don't really care like they should, like they know they should, like they wish they should. Now, if you start putting that into mind and realize that that's the national average, 7 out of every 10 people are somewhat or fully unengaged. You see the depth and the size of the problem. So how do you become the good boss? You become the good boss by not being bad. My rule is you don't have to be amazing. You just have to be amazing in comparison. The truth of the matter is the engagement is because the loyalty that companies once held from their employees is gone. So the only thing left is almost a tribal engagement between leaders and the people who work for them. That's where you have to focus. But if you're engaged, if you're genuinely invested in your employees, genuinely invested in the team and their betterment, that's all it takes. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to give a damn, to be frank. And if you do, just by comparison of how few people do that, you are the good boss. So let's talk about why people are disengaged. 1, they don't care. This is literally where they say, it's just a job. You're going to have a hard time reaching that person. Sometimes what you have to do is move people in and out, but every now and then you do. It's worth a try. But that's a hard one to tackle. It's a job. It's tough. All right? The second one is they think that the boss doesn't care. This is the single most common thing you will ever hear. My boss doesn't care. He only cares about himself. She only cares about getting her bonus. They could get her crap. They just phone it in every day. This is the single most common thing when you have unengaged people. And chances are their last boss didn't. That's the interesting point. It's an actual legitimate statement. You've just got to turn it around. Third one is, and oh my goodness, I heard this at an old company. The company doesn't care. That's harsh, isn't it? Usually this is in low-touch industries or high-attrition industries, which unfortunately includes BPO, by the way. Since so many people move in and so many people move out, this culture comes almost like, well, I'm not going to bother learning your name. You won't be here long enough. We've all heard those jokes. And for those of you who have been in the military, you know where that comes from. It's kind of common, but only in certain industries. Then, of course, my other favorite one is people are unengaged because they aren't supported. This is where people say they're tasked to fail. This is where they say, I wasn't given the resources, I wasn't given the manpower, I wasn't given the budget, I wasn't given the time to succeed. When someone feels tasked to fail, they quit in their head long before they walk out of the building. And then finally, they think the business is dropping, going down, as it were. This is where they say the business is static, the business is failing, we're not growing, we're falling behind, whatever the case may be. In general, this is a failure of senior leadership to sell the vision, to convince people that there's a future or a way forward. This almost always happens when there's poor communication at a company and you basically leave your employees in the dark. So all of these are reasons for people to be unengaged. So how do you view the good boss? The fact is that the uninvested and the unengaged don't want to be so. They want to be engaged. I promise you, no one gets up in the morning, comes to work and says, I want to do a bad job. It doesn't happen. No one gets up in the morning and says, I'm going to go in and not give a damn. Well, all right, 1 or 2 might, but they generally don't last very long. Your average person who's on your team is not saying these things, not intentionally. So if you give them a way to not feel this way, they'll take it. They'll grab it with both hands. Things will improve. So let's talk about what you need to do to convince your employees you're engaged. Self-driven management, which was actually, I believe, the title of this cute little speech, is a management technique wherein you are engaged. And since you are engaged, it makes your employees feel engaged. Therefore, their performance increases. You're not focusing on making this, or this better. You're focusing on making yourself more engaged and being very visible in the engagement process. This makes people want to be with you. This makes the entire team work better, and you have to mean it. So first, 1, make and keep the promise. If you want to be a leader, lead. Don't equivocate. Don't sit around talking all day. Don't imagine, think, I'm going to have study groups. If you're going to tell somebody that you're going to be the boss, start making decisions. There was a situation here not too terribly long ago where someone who used to work for me, no names, it's some time ago, we have a choice between doing these 3 or 4 things, and I said, we're doing that one. But the conversation kept going. So why are we still talking about it? We wanted to see which one is the best. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it was the best decision. It was a decision. It's been made. moveon.org.com.net. Let's go. If you're going to say that you're going to be a leader, lead. It's not so important when things are going well, but you build up a reputation as being somebody willing to step forward and willing to make hard decisions. When things go bad, they naturally turn to you. So that's one, actually be the leader. Number 2, bring the team into the vision. And when I say bring the team into the vision, I'm talking about the company, the org, the team, and you. You've got to tell them why we're going this way, why we're doing this thing. You want to stay away from the problem where the company isn't selling their strategic vision. So you have to sell the strategic vision, which brings up number 3, context. We made one decision as a company just before I got here, and the team reacted very negatively to it. Some of you on this very meeting, where somebody made a decision that we were going to do a thing with a technology platform, no conversation, no communication. That's just what we were doing. Now, my job, unfortunately, at that point is simply to carry it out. However, that hasn't happened again since I've been here. I talk to my team. We have leadership meetings every week. I give context. We're doing this because. We're making that move because. That's not the same thing as necessarily asking everybody to be on board with me. I'm not necessarily saying everybody needs to agree because we're all going to vote, because that's not how I work on a good day. But I give context. I'm not going to turn around to the people who report to me and say, we're doing this, and then not explain why. Context is everything. People will do a lot of things if they understand why you're doing it. So you have to make that plain. 4, and this is funny, problems should be transparent. I openly plan for problems. I don't act like everything's going to go perfect. I don't pretend everything's going to work right 100% of the time. Problems happen every day. That's okay. We're IT. We fix problems. That's what we do for a living. But the fact that I openly plan for problems, if this goes wrong, we're going to do that, goes a long way toward engaging your team. Think about why. You're telling them it's okay if something goes wrong as long as you respond and react. They don't feel like they have to be perfect. You're part of an organization doing something together. They feel engaged. They don't have to pretend to be Superman. This, I found, makes a heck of a difference. All right? This is kind of an interesting one. 5, recognition. I want you guys to think about the times, and I know no one can read my writing. I don't know why I bother doing this. I want you guys to think about the times that I've sent a note out and said, Eddie, because that's my favorite name to use, Eddie did a good job. I always say Eddie and the team, Eddie and BI, Eddie and applications, Eddie and network, Eddie and operations. They did really great. Hey, Johnny, really appreciate your help. You know, Karen, it really meant a lot that you did that for all of us. You know, the point is that when you're praising, you put it in terms of the team. You can't just recognize a person because, to be frank with you, there's no such thing as a person who does everything on their own. We're all an organization. We're going to pass, lose, win, or fail together. That's how it goes. Development plans. Some of you know all about this. A lot of people manage with corrective action plans in one hand. That's okay. I mean, it's certainly a valid way of doing business. Aero Electronics, not too far down the street from us, does that very thing. Some other people who completely misunderstood Jack Welch believe in nuking the lower 10% of their business every year. Wow, was that not what Jack Welch said? But there's some people that did it. I remember when Avaya did it for a while, and all I could do, I rolled my eyes so hard, it's a wonder I didn't detach my retina. Development plans. If I can have a corrective action plan in this hand for something bad, why don't I have a development plan in this hand? It's an opportunity to build someone a future. It's to talk about the things that they can do and what you're going to do for them if they do. You've got to focus on the positive aspects of your people. You can't just walk around only focusing on the negative. That makes people unengaged. It makes people give up. It makes people give up on you, and it makes them give up on the company. So you have to have the positive in mind, not just the negative. 7, you need to be engaged enough to create a leader. Now, I want you to hear this. You're not a leader until you make one. You're a manager at best. When you can create a leader, when you can focus on someone else's needs to make them better themselves and better your entire organization, well, congratulations. Now you've done it. Create a leader. It's harder than people think. I use something, and this is a little different. I mean, I think I've heard START, situation, task, action, response, STAR. I guess that one was. There's a START, there's a SMART, there's all these different things. My favorite, ROW. Some of you aren't aware of the fact that I manage you this way, but you will be now. When people come to me with issues, I usually ask a series of questions. I say, really, what are you trying to get to? What's your goal? How is it now? What are we looking at? What's out there in the street? What's the reality of the situation? All right, what do you want to do about it? How many different ways can you handle this? What's your options? Okay, well, of those, which one do you think the right way to go? That's your way forward. I use this all the time. None of you are aware of, well, maybe a few, but very few. What's really wonderful is after I'd been here about a year, people started coming to me and they started saying, hey, Wayne, I want to do this thing because it looks like this right now. I can do these 2 or 3, but I want to do this. What do you think? They have no idea. I just taught them grow. This is leadership thinking. This is strategic thinking. It's not a task. It's not a do. This is about creating a leader, and that's why I use it. Your mileage may vary on the form, the type, or how you do it, but if you're not managing to let people grow, you're not a leader. That's really all it comes down to. 8, sincerity. I can't say this strong enough. Sincerity is key. If you don't mean this, it's not going to work. You can't fake this. You can fail, but you can't fake. You can make a mistake. You can mess up. You cannot live up to your ideals, and I don't. No one does. That's why I have a reset every week. You can completely blow it on occasion. Failure's fine. You can't fake it. If you can't sincerely give a damn about the people that work for you, you're not going to make it anyway. You might be a wonderful individual contributor, but you're not going to be a leader. You need to be sincere and care about the people on your team. Finally, well, not finally, because there's 2 more. The engagement, motivation and performance, every single touch matters. What does that mean? Well, there was a heck of a book back in the day called SAP versus ZAP or some such silliness. But I go back to Rockefeller. Who's the most important person in your entire organization? And Rockefeller said, whoever touched the customer last. Because the last impression is the one that carries the day. Your last interaction is what people feel of you. You could do 100 different things, but if on that one day you were an absolute SOB, I don't know, maybe you didn't get enough sleep. Maybe you had a wreck on the way to work. But if you mistreated someone, if you were too harsh, and I do it all the time, make it right. Make it right, because that last touch is what they remember. I absolutely promise you. It's got to be constant. It's got to be every day. Each touch matters. Finally, because there is a finally, growth, humility, and stepping up. I always do something nautical when I talk to people. I don't know why it's a thing. You're the boss. You make all the decisions. That's the equivalent of a rudder. Think about this. Rudder is pointless if you don't have forward movement. The old sailing vessels, they would put up the sails, the wind would hit it, push it forward, then the rudder matters. If your team isn't behind you, you can make all the clever decisions in the world. You can make all the right calls. You can just plan it out every single day what the organization should do. But if you don't have the sails right, if your entire team isn't working as one, and if you aren't all following or pushing against the wind the way you're supposed to, without forward motion, You can turn that rudder all day. It doesn't do anything. So stay humble while you're doing this. Work on your team. But just like I said, motivation is everything. Just like I said, sincerity is important. The plain fact of the matter is if you become a solid leader and you get a solid working team, you should be grateful every single day that they let you be part of their organization. When I send out the notes to all IT and say, I'm just proud to be part of the team, I'm not kidding. It's legit. We have unquestionably one of, if not the strongest IT teams I've ever been blessed to work with. And I'm grateful for that every day. My gratitude comes out by caring what happens to them. And it goes right back to you being engaged. If you're engaged, the team is engaged. If the team is engaged, everything works. Everything works. The sail, the wind, the rudder, you move forward. That's everything for today. Next week, we're going to talk about the 10 most common mistakes made by new leaders. There is optional reading, which is Talent is Overrated by Colvin. We're not going to go over the book. We don't really need to. But it really does make a couple of great points around you may not have the most talented individual, but if you have talented individuals and a lot of them and they're all working together, you'll get much farther than trying to find a single rock star. Team is more important. All right, everybody. Thank you very much. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Yep. I didn't hear a single thing.
Later.